Hi again, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Marriage RX, keeping your marriage healthy during a pandemic. I'm Pastor Brian Coffey. This is my wife, Lorene, who's director of Chapelstreet Women. And you may know by now if you've watched before, or maybe this is your first time, but Marriage RX is an open conversation with several couples from Chapelstreet about how we can navigate through this weird season of COVID-19 while maintaining or even growing the health and strength of our marriages.
So this is episode number 4. And if you have been able to join us for our first 3 episodes, just a reminder of what we've covered, the multiple stresses that this season of COVID has created for families and specifically for married couples. We talked about coping strategies. And last time we talked about conflict. You can go back and watch any of those episodes by going to chapelstreet.church/marriagerx. And so we want to also introduce today our couples that are back with us. We're so grateful because that they have set time aside. Some have gotten sitters, some have sent kids away somewhere. I don't know where the kids are, but we're glad that you all are with us again. So Brenda and Ryan Saul are with us, and Amy and Eric Elfman, and Brandon and Carrie Peterson. So thank you so much for joining us again.
Well, the past year or so, this season has forced us all to focus on physical health, and rightly so. We're living in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, but we have to recognize, I think, that emotional and spiritual health are actually equally important. I went to get a physical last, I think it was early September, just a routine full checkup, and I've seen this same doctor for years. And as he was doing my checkup and taking blood and that sort of stuff, we just started a conversation. And I asked him, "Hey, so you're seeing a lot of COVID cases?" This is right in Geneva. And he said something interesting. He said he had seen a few and seen some really hard ones, but he said by September of last fall, he said, "I'm seeing a lot more of the residual effects of the virus. That is the effects of quarantining, the effects of being holed up at home with your family." He said he was seeing much more of that than the virus itself. He talked about anxiety and depression and grief issues and substance abuse and anger and sleep issues. And there was a whole list of things that he talked about. So as we've said through the series, this has been a season of stress, sometimes extreme stress. And stress can not only create an atmosphere that produces conflict, but it also has an undeniable emotional and spiritual impact on our lives. And if we add to that the changes in how people are able to stay connected with family or friends, the loss of consistent social outlets, even changes in church involvement, the result is that many of us, many couples, are missing the support we need and want for our emotional and spiritual health.
So a question we have for you is that as you look back over the last several months, how would you describe the emotional and or spiritual impact that COVID has had on you personally and in your marriage? The spiritual and emotional impact it's had on you personally and in your marriage. So Elfmans, let me start with you and just get some input from you as a couple as you've kind of reflect on that question looking back since the start of this pandemic.
I think generally we've been okay. It kind of feels like a hold on situation. Looking as Brian said, I think last episode, towards maybe the light at the end of the tunnel. Emotionally ups and downs I think have come with work changes and things of that nature that just like cause a whole bunch of stress to spike. And then the emotions follow that. Spiritually, I think we've had some really good months actually. Last fall we did the Rooted study, which we had not done before, and we did it with some folks that we had been in a small group with, and known for a long time. But I think it really asked a lot of us in a good way, in a way that I don't think I even was expecting, and so that was really good. Anything else?
I mean, I think emotionally and spiritually, talking about that lack of connection, it forced us to be more intentional with our spiritual health and with our emotional health. And I think it made us maybe value, you know, like our rooted group, we were so thankful to have that connection with people that I feel like we were willing to go really deep, because it was just like, we know these are the people we're seeing right now, and we're so thankful to be on this faith journey with them.
Mhm,
And I think for us, that maybe saved us, that, you know, we had that outlet still in the midst of like a spiritual and emotional vacuum. You know, there was still, God provided that.
Yeah, let me jump in there for a second, because some people watching may not know what Rooted is.
mhm.
That's right. That's right. Rooted is it's a small group curriculum that lasts about 10 weeks,
Mhm.
weekly gatherings, and it's a spiritual discipleship and intentional spiritual growth design curriculum that's group oriented. So did you guys do that through on virtual means, through Zoom, or in person?
It was mostly in person outside.
Oh, right. Was it back in the summer or fall?
In the fall.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
a couple cold ones, but we made it through.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I was just wanted to explain to people that's what that is. And have you been able to sort of sustain some of that contact, that if that took place 10 weeks back in the fall, you were able to sustain that, and that became part of your weekly or maybe bi-weekly connection?
We have picked another book to study
Okay.
with the same folks, and
Okay.
to be honest, we haven't started yet. We just have the book, and we're waiting to try to find a time where everyone can get together. So
Okay.
Good.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks. How about Carrie and Brandon? How about you guys? Emotional or spiritual impact of COVID?
The emotional part would just, again, not the unexpected, are our kids going to end up getting sent home, quarantining, what does that mean? What are we going to have to miss? Kind of projecting out 3 weeks, at all times, like, okay, what's going to happen if we come down with something and things like that. So I think that just creates an anxiety and a little bit of emotional wear and tear on you. But as far as spiritually, Brandon and I both separately, I did it with a girls group, he did it with a men's group, have joined book studies as we've been invited through people from the church, which is something that was new to me. I've done Bible study before, but this was just more like a book club.
Okay.
And it was all through Zoom. And, we each had our own experiences with that. But then on top of that, one thing I've really liked watching Brandon kind of lead on is, I think, through boredom a little bit and tired of Netflix and things like that, he's picked different topics to study from the Bible, and he's, researched different libraries to get the different books from, and he kind of takes that time to dig in, because when there's just not enough going on, and you need something to stimulate your brain and to give you a way to I don't know.
Yeah, I personally kind of like biblical archaeology, and
Really?
And I don't.
Right. So
that's a separate thing.
Right now I'm kind of reading a book on the Tower of Babel, and I came across too just like different archaeological videos on YouTube, like Mount Sinai. Where is it really located? I don't know. Like when you have more time, you can sort of maybe dig into some spiritual niche interests that maybe you wouldn't normally do when you're working 12 hours a day in the rat race of the suburbs.
Yeah.
So I think we've utilized time in certain different ways than normally we wouldn't have done.
Yeah. Good. It's interesting to hear about the book clubs too. And you felt like those were good quick connections, despite the having to do it via Zoom, that still provided the connections that were fulfilling for you.
Yeah, it was almost like a little break from COVID, because we didn't focus on that, because we had a book to, we had a common goal, and we all got together based on that, rather than just another conversation about COVID. So
yeah, a nice diversion.
Yeah, a diversion for sure.
Yeah, good. Ryan and Brenda, how about you two?
I mean, through the pandemic, there was obviously a lot of more downs, I would say, than ups. Trying to run a company when you're completely shut down and having the responsibility of a company with no revenue coming in for months on end quickly could become suffocating.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was pretty early on in the pandemic, I came to the realization that, boy, I did not have the armor of God prepared. My prayer life wasn't as strong as it should have been. I wasn't in the Word as much as I should have been. So really early on, it was an eye opener. And unfortunately, it took a pandemic to realize when things are great, isn't the time to scramble and try to get back on track. So, really early on, turn to prayer quite often and many times throughout the day, setting aside time, because all we have is time, and just spending time with God and praying. And it helped tremendously. I think a lot of us quickly realized we weren't in control. With everything going on, none of it was in control. And that's, for me, and being a guy, that's one thing that I could control, is just praying and turning it all over to God. So that's one spiritual exercise that really helped me throughout the pandemic when things were on the downside. And then Brenda was always supportive throughout the whole process. So.
Yeah, and I would just say, for me, emotionally, I mean, between women's Bible study and I volunteer a lot at the church, I mean, a good 3 of my mornings would be at church on a normal week doing something there. And then that was all kind of taken away. And contrary to the fact that I'm sitting on this Zoom call, I really don't like Zoom calls. So like, I haven't done Bible study on Zoom, and it just, I don't really want to. And so we've been kind of up and down. We started really good with watching church from home, and then you find one's half asleep and you're getting the dog and one's throwing a ball, and and so it just kind of up and down of what you stick with and what you don't. The one thing I did do, it makes you think outside the box. I spent a couple months helping at the Shepherd's Heart Pantry because I hadn't done that before. In my normal places I volunteer, I couldn't. And so it made me think, well, what can I be doing? So, I mean, it did lend itself to definitely some new experiences. You just have to kind of keep seeking out things to fill you up in whatever way.
Yeah, and Ryan and Brenda too. Let me take it a little bit different direction with you two, and the others can chime in. But you have kids who are in high school, and they may have gone through. I mean, every kid in school suffered losses, and this past year by missing out in class, by trying to learn through virtually, but kids in high school, especially if they were athletes, whatever, lost whole seasons, lost a whole rhythm of what they had maybe had worked hard to get. And now talk a little bit about the emotional or spiritual impact of watching your kids struggle with losses.
I think that's been one of the most heart-jerking things as a parent, to watch them. But then we would kind of say to each other, not in front of the kids, we feel like we're mourning the loss of this high school years we thought they'd have or whatever. But then we would remind ourselves, they don't know the high school years we had. They don't know. I mean, they know life isn't like this usually, but they don't have that whole experience under their belt. But it's really, maybe when I look back, I'll say that was one of my favorite things, the conversations with them that have come out of this, because when you all of a sudden take away all the things they've worked for years, they've worked at being good at this sport or worked at whatever, and now it's taken away, and we don't know how long it's taken away, and we don't know if you can do that even in college now. So the conversations we've had with them about just the bigger picture and what is important and what you've got to remember, that whether it goes this way or that way, you need to be grounded in this. So some of those conversations that have come out of it, I think for them and us, will probably be some of the best moments of this whole thing, and we wouldn't trade it. We would go through it again just to get that perspective, So that's been really good.
Yeah, speaking as a parent, there's hardly anything more painful than watching your kids go through something that's hard or pain that you can't help, that you can't do anything about. And I've thought often over this past year, even in our neighborhood here, I know the families that that have kids playing football or kids playing baseball, and I'll sometimes ask, hey, how's everybody doing? And it's been hard. It's been hard on kids and on parents.
Carrie, were you going to step in and say something a minute ago?
I was just going to say it's almost kind of shown. I feel like my prayer life has kind of changed a lot more towards praise recently, just because you almost develop more of an appreciation, like when you've had something and then it's kind of lost. And then when you get it back, or you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I remember the first church service we were able to go to, the outdoor service. I stood there with just tears because I couldn't believe. I guess I didn't realize from home at first, oh, this is fun. I've got my coffee, I've got my slippers on and things like that. But you really do start to miss that. And when I stood there, it was just with tears and the, the sun and the sky behind the steeple. I just was in awe of like, Lord, you give and take away, but this is what we're able to realize through something like this. And that was such a profound moment for me that, I've been able to share that a little bit with the kids. Like, guys, sometimes this is the way it is, because they've asked so many times, like, why can't we just ask God to take coronavirus away? And so we've had these conversations that, we never would have had. So there are like those types of things. Spiritually, I've just developed a whole new level of thanks.
Yeah. Well, that actually is a great segue to this question. What, with the rhythms of church being disrupted, have you had any new spiritual habits or routines that have developed out of them for yourselves or in your marriages? You mentioned, Carrie, that you feel like this season has led you to more kind of the spiritual discipline of praise. That's one thing that has developed. Has anything developed as a couple in your marriages that has come out of new spiritual habits during this time? And if not, that's fine. We just thought we would ask the question, just open it up if there's been anything that's developed for you on the home front as a couple with things disrupted out of in the normal routine of church life.
I'll chime in here. I think for us, I guess I wouldn't say it's new, just more solidified in that our morning time in prayer and reading the word has just been pretty rock solid as far as, hey, now we got time. Like I don't have early rehearsals. She's not going in right away with the way the schedule is working out. That just became a thing that was a lot easier to set down. Like the kids know it. The TVs don't go on. It's pretty quiet down here outside of the darn dogs. But other than that, like that's been a great thing. And this isn't us, but something you guys know that I work at the church in worship, and sometimes because it's a job, it can be a job. It can feel a little weird to be up there. It's you can't always feel like you're worshiping when you're worrying about hitting this button on the computer and what you're going to say next and all that. But one of the things that's come out of this is spending time at home working on some of these things. And my oldest daughter, Grace, she sings, and she'll just come next to me and sing. And it's just one of those things that it probably wouldn't have happened if we weren't together all the time. Because I'll find those moments to do that work whenever I can, so that I have family time to, give to them. And this was the time. This is and I know Amy's over there tearing up as she's watching us.
I have so many good videos.
So that's been a really sweet just byproduct that kind of came out of this for me, is to not to be trite, but get back to the heart of worship.
Yeah.
So for you guys, your family, it's the early morning, that first slot in the morning is now more quiet, more and you use that for a little kind of a little spiritual moment, or a worship moment, or in the word moment, even as a couple or individually and as a family. Okay, cool. Yeah. Someone else. How about you, Sauls? Any new rhythms you found yourself building that when the church couldn't provide them for you?
I was just going to say my prayer life, and it's pretty similar, that morning time carved out to start the day, because it was going to be a battle every day emotionally. So that is one spiritual discipline that has really come out of this.
And I would just echo what Carrie was saying. I feel like, especially with talking with the kids, and like you're saying, it's so what they've lost is so in front of their face every minute. So I'm just constantly trying to remind them of, we need to focus on what we're grateful for and what you do have. And I feel like they've done a good job with that. But so it's not a certain time of the day, but it's definitely, those conversations are much more prevalent than if we were just going about our normal routines.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say the same thing as the Sauls. I mean, it's just more time. More time means more opportunities. I find myself with my oldest son just talking about sort of like relevant spiritual matters that might connect to a 10-year-old in the car going to his basketball practice, where normally I wouldn't have that. So It's not so much for us anything too regular or ritualistic. It's just more opportunities that maybe we wouldn't otherwise have.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I love something about what each one of you has shared, and you have something in common in that uh, we all belong and worship at the same church. So, and Chapelstreet does lots and lots of great things, but when that rhythm is disrupted, when the normal rhythms of life are disrupted, we have to decide either to sort of let the virus win in a sense, and drift into anxiety and watch the news all the time, and get all feel the worry and the fear and all that, or we sort of fight back, and we sort of use this unexpected time and space to be proactive. And each of you have done it in your own ways, from joining a rooted group, and then or joining a book club, or researching ancient archaeology, which is really kind of cool. Or making sure you're spending extra time early in the morning in prayer. I get up early, and I have walked off at most days, even last couple of weeks. I like to go out by myself when it's dark and walk. That's just always been a time for me. But each of you has in some way been proactive and intentional about pursuing, using this time as sort of a gift and pursuing something. And that's the message that we kind of wanted to try to get out through this last session, is giving examples about how, when the church can't provide, or when you can't go to church and have the content or the prayer or the worship kind of done for you, what are you going to do? Are we just going to just wait and drift away, or are we going to dig in and find some new avenues to grow and new avenues to share our faith together? But I want to thank you for sharing those things. There's a lot of good stuff in there. I hope people are watching, heard some things that can encourage them even now to try some new things in their marriage or in their families. We want to kind of close by making a couple of more concrete suggestions that just occurred to us as we're thinking about this. And again, if you're watching, you could make some notes here. First is, it may sound funny, but to practice Sabbath. We did a whole series back in January at Chapelstreet on Sabbath rest. And Sabbath, as we talked about it, is not just one of the 10 commandments. It's not just some ancient religious rule that we keep, but rather it's God's invitation to create space for emotional and spiritual rest. It means to rest from our work. But more than that, since a lot of us are working from home, it means to take a healthy break from all the different things that just can cause noise and stress and anxiety. It might mean to turn off the TV news, to disengage from social media, to put down devices just for a period of time on a day or for one day a week, to abstain from email or Twitter or Facebook or whatever other form of social media. It means to intentionally cease filling our lives with activity and noise, which all of you have talked about, so that we can experience the spiritual and emotional rest that God wants to give us. And that might include worship, whether in person or virtual. And as a church, we do either one right now. Participating in some sort of corporate worship experience reminds us of who God is. It reminds us that God knows each one of us by name. And our kids need to understand, need to know that even if they can't go to church, we can still worship, that he loves us and wants to give us good things. Worship reminds us that we're part of a larger community, that we're part of a much larger family of faith. And that's important. We're not alone. We're not crazy. We're not abandoned. We are part of something much bigger. And worship kind of reorients our hearts. It takes our focus off our immediate frustrations and circumstances and losses, helps us see a much bigger picture. And all of you have talked about that, of what God might be doing in the world and in each one of us.
Yeah, another suggestion is prayer. And you all have mentioned this too in various ways. Personal prayer might just be the most important thing we can do in coping with stress. And Ryan, I like the way you said it's one of the things we can control. I like that, being somebody who likes to control things and have feeling a little bit out of sorts with so much that's out of control, but it is one thing we can. And some of my favorite verses, Philippians 4:6 and 7, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. So prayer, as we know, gives us a place to confess, to be honest with God, gives us a place to unload, whether it's our stresses, our fears, our anxieties, our anger, our sadness. It allows us to receive what God has for us, what he wants to give, his peace. And I think that's certainly what we all want during this time when we have the anxiety and the uncertainty about what is ahead. And if it's not, those who are watching, if it's not part of your daily practice, it's something that can be started. Maybe that's your new thing to start during this season, an easy thing to start at the beginning of the day, start at the end of the day, bookend your day with simple prayer. It's like talking to a friend and thanking God for the day you've experienced, or giving him the start of the day, starting with a spouse. And that can be an awkward thing to start, but it's a way to draw closer as more to build intimacy by praying together. They don't need to be long prayers. They can be very simple, but again, a way to build intimacy with God and each other.
And I would add to that, and it's something even can help us pray, because some of you watching may not be comfortable and maybe not be used to praying either personally or with your marriage partner, with your family. But Scripture, the Bible itself, can help you with that. Many people, I think, have not had the experience and have not learned to read the Bible on their own and think about it or meditate on it or pray through the Bible. Sometimes we depend on our church to do that for us, or our pastor to do that for us. And that's all fine and good, but we can do that on our own. For example, read the Psalms. Let me just read a couple of short portions of Psalms that relate to where we are right now as a culture and as a people. Psalm 46 says, "God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging." Now, that's just the beginning of the psalm, and it goes on from there, but it certainly is felt at times, whether we're talking about political news or social news or the virus, it certainly felt at times like the world's falling apart all around us. But the psalm reminds us that God is our refuge, our place of safety. And it's good to read those words. Psalm 40 says, "I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire," like he's talking about politics there, "and set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God." I've often encouraged people who are struggling maybe with emotions, or struggling with sadness, or struggling with a situation, to simply begin reading through the Psalms. Just open your Bible. Psalms are right about in the middle. Find the Psalms, start reading until you find a Psalm that says what your heart wants to say, that expresses what you're feeling and experiencing, and then turn that Psalm into a personal prayer. You'll find one that puts your feelings to voice, because there's all kinds of Psalms in the Bible.
Well, and another one is, you don't have to be a musician like Eric to appreciate music. And this is something, if you're like me, music speaks to your heart and soul in a way that sometimes nothing else does. And so you can consider making your own personal playlist of worship music, instrumental hymns, worship songs, and play those in a way that can feed your mind and soul with things that are uplifting, with words and music that are uplifting. And they can change your emotions. They can fill you up in really a wonderful way. I've done a lot of that these last few months.
And she won't say, but she also plays piano some. And so when I come home or I hear the piano start going, I know she's having almost a time of devotional worship by herself. And I just listen from the other room, because I know that's what that means to her. Let me add something very different. How about getting regular exercise? This is important, and it's been a real challenge in these recent months. I mean, we're living in the middle of a pandemic, so fitness centers are closed, gyms are closed, and we've been like living in Siberia for 3 weeks, so it's been hard even to take a walk outside. But exercise is good for us, body and soul. It's good for our physical bodies, but also for our emotional and spiritual health. When we get regular exercise, even if it's just bundling up like crazy and walking once around the block, we feel better. Our stress level goes down. We sleep better. And that translates into emotional and spiritual health. And the last thing I would mention before we wrap up is find ways to have fun. Find ways to have fun. I was taking a walk a couple of weeks ago during the time of all the snow, like 4 days in a row. I was just trying to get my 10,000 steps in, all bundled up, walking through the neighborhood, trying to get home. And I saw a number of families that had built snowmen in their yards. So I was kind of smiling, look at this nice snowman, look at that nice snowman. And then I saw a snowman, I did a double take, and this family built an upside down snowman. It was standing on its head and had stick feet sticking out with boots on. And I just stopped and I laughed out loud. And then I thought how much fun that family must have had building the only upside down snowman that I'd ever seen. Just fun. Find ways to have fun together as a family and even as a couple. Play a game, cook or bake something together. We actually, our son and daughter-in-law gave us a cookbook for Christmas with all kinds of comfort food in it. So we decided on Valentine's Day to make this giant cake called a blackout chocolate cake. And it was way too much for two of us. Made it from scratch and it was awesome and it was fun. And we still have like half of it left there. We're working our way through this thing a little bit every night. Watch a favorite movie together. Turn your family room into a movie theater, make popcorn, the whole deal, and laugh together. There's an old saying, laughter is the best medicine, but you may not know that that actually comes from the Bible. Proverbs 17:22 says, a joyful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries the bones. Don't let your bones dry up. Have fun. Have fun together. Now, we're all aware of the importance of getting a vaccine out. We've been hearing about it for months, and we hear the news every day, more and more people getting a vaccine for COVID-19. And that's important. We need to slow the virus, need to prevent sickness. It's all necessary and good. But what we're talking about today, and what we've been talking about in Marriage RX, is a kind of vaccine for the soul. It means to pay attention to your heart, pay attention to your own spiritual and emotional health. Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard or keep your heart, for everything you do comes from it. So we want to thank you guys, thank Ryan and Brenda, and Brandon and Carrie, and Eric and Amy for sharing your lives with us, for being open and fun and vulnerable. And we want to leave those of you watching with a question and a challenge before we finish. Here's a question. How's your heart? How's your heart? How's your marriage? How are you doing really? Have you talked about it? Have you paid attention? Are you willing to do that? And here's the challenge. Don't let the season of COVID determine the health of your marriage and family. Fight back. Use this time like these couples have in many ways. Use this time to build healthy, spiritual, and emotional habits, practices, routines into your family life, and most importantly, into your marriage. We hope these episodes have been encouraging and helpful, maybe a little bit fun for you if you're watching. And like Lorene said earlier, all 4 episodes can be found at chapelstreet.church/marriagerx. You can watch any of them anytime. We want to thank all of you for joining.